Hello, my name is Danielle Ames Spivak. I am the CEO and Executive Vice President of the American Friends of the Israel Philharmonic. We are thrilled to bring you this challah bake tonight. A few notes before we officially begin and I introduce Beth. We had thought this would be more interactive. I figured we'd be a dozen or so people across the country in our kitchens baking challah together before Rosh Hashanah or for Shabbat. However, the interest in this program has ballooned to hundreds, nearly 1,000 people, and therefore, from a tech capability perspective, it became impossible for this to be extremely interactive. But after the program, or even during, if you have any questions for Dr. Beth Ricanati, you are welcome to contact her on social media. And I know Beth will give you that contact info during the program. I want to remind everybody, you might have seen the slide at the beginning, that the Israel Philharmonic is returning to the United States in just a few months. And we hope we'll see all of you at various venues across the country. There's nothing like experiencing the cultural ambassador of Israel performing Hatikva in your own hometown. And we ask that not only will you join us, but tell your friends about it, make it a date night, make it a girls' night out, bring your children or people in your family that play instruments, and find me and introduce yourself, because I'll be everywhere the orchestra goes as well. So we're going to get into the challah baking. We think this is a very important time of year to spend some time focusing inward and doing activities that spark joy and creativity and reflection and soulful energy. And nobody is able to get us to that point more than Dr. Beth Ricanati, who for so many years devoted herself to treatment and healing of the body, and now has expanded to all aspects of the human existence. And thank you, Beth. We're so happy you're here with us.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, or I suppose good afternoon, depending where you are. I'm in California, so I guess it's late afternoon, but welcome regardless. I am thrilled to be making challah with you all now. Thrilled for so many reasons. It's my absolute favorite ritual, and just like music soothes the soul for so many people, making challah for me soothes my soul. I've been doing this for about 15 years now. I started actually at this time. I started at the Jewish New Year about 15 years ago, when a girlfriend of mine contacted me. We had been living in New York City. We were back in Ohio. And she said to me, you know, Beth, you should make challah for the Jewish New Year. I was working then at the Cleveland Clinic. We had three small children. And I thought she was absolutely crazy. You will see, because we're going to use that exact same recipe, that it's really quite simple. But I was overwhelmed, and I thought that what she was asking of me was nuts. But I made challah that day, and at the risk of some hyperbole, maybe a lot of hyperbole, it changed my life. Arguably, it saved my life. I'm an internist by training, and I had been on a hamster wheel for a very long time. First in New York, I was at Columbia, then back in Cleveland at the Cleveland Clinic. And I didn't stop to look up for a long time. And making challah that day, right before the Jewish holiday, was transformative. I stood at the kitchen counter. I had my ingredients out in front of me, and okay, I called Abby 4 times because I couldn't figure out how to mix the 6 ingredients in a bowl, but it'll be easier, I promise, today. But something happened that day, because I just stood in the silence and made, or tried to make, challah, tried to make the dough. And I wasn't busy answering my pager and worrying about my patients, and I wasn't picking up toys and signing permission slips and worrying about my kids. I just was focused on the flour and the sugar and the salt and trying to create something new. And it became such a gift for me that I've been doing it ever since. I've been doing this now for about 15 years. I make challah every Friday. I make it when we travel. I've been known to bring those little yeast packets with me. And I suppose if I played a musical instrument, it would be like practicing scales again and again and playing out your favorite piece over and over again. I find so much joy and sustenance in this activity. So I'm thrilled that you're going to join me in experiencing that this evening. For those of you who are baking, I want you to please make sure you have it close by. I will go over these ingredients again and again and again, so not to worry. But if you could have close by the 6 ingredients that we need: flour, sugar, salt, oil, eggs, and yeast. Okay, that's all you need. And a bowl, of course. I like to set everything up ahead of time. I do this every week, whether it's myself or whether I'm with all of you, but I find that it's incredibly helpful. There's a term in the kitchen called mise en place. It's not actually where I learned that expression, but it's really helpful. It means to sort of have everything set up so you have what you need. I actually learned it when I was in my residency. At the beginning, I was incredibly nervous. I was afraid that I might harm a patient when I was trying a new procedure. And I had a wonderful older resident who told me one night when we were setting up, you know, Beth, she said, if you just spread everything out that you need in front of you ahead of time, then you'll have what you need and you don't need to worry as much. I have found that lesson to be incredible, and I use it all the time in all aspects of my life, including making challah. So I do like to set everything up ahead of time. I have 3 goals for us this evening as we make challah. The first goal is that we're going to make challah with intention. And I'll talk about that in a minute because that is the first step. The second goal is that we're going to have a tactile experience. We're going to get our hands dirty. We're going to get a little messy. And the third goal is for you to make yummy and delicious challah, which I can almost guarantee, having done this now for so long. Okay, so let's get started. The first goal is the goal of intention. I learned a really wonderful way to elevate the experience of making challah when I got to make challah in Israel. And that is this idea of bringing intention to the activity. And the way to do that is to stop at the beginning and to think about in whose merit you wish to make this batch of dough. I mean, after all, you signed up and took time out of your day to do this. So there's a reason, right? There's a reason why we're here. So sometimes I pick big reasons and sometimes I pick small reasons. I'm not sure my children would appreciate it, but when I say a small reason, maybe it's because they had a test this week and they were studying and I wanted to think about them and honor their work. Sometimes it's a little bit more. We have a very dear friend right now who's ill. Been thinking a lot about their recovery. And so I have made some dough earlier this week in their merit. Sometimes it's even bigger during the height of the pandemic. And I was thinking about some of the first responders. I would often make challah in their merit. So it just depends. But I have one ask of you when I stop talking for a minute. I want you to think about in whose merit you wish to make the dough, and I want you to say it out loud. That's the key. Even if you're alone in the kitchen or wherever you are making your dough tonight, I want you to say it out loud, because another lesson that I've learned is that when you put things out into the universe, the most incredible things happen. Okay, so I'm going to be quiet for a minute, and I just want you to think about in whose merit you wish to make this dough. Okay, thank you. There are actually several steps along the way where we can bring intention and elevate the process. So I'll talk about that as we go. Okay, so the first part of making challah is the science experiment. That is, we get to play with yeast. I think one of the reasons I had never made challah until that first time about 15 years ago, I had never worked with yeast. I was afraid of it. There's no need to be afraid. So what I want you to do is grab 1 packet of yeast, or if you're using loose yeast like I am, 2¼ teaspoons. So 1 packet or 2¼ teaspoons. You can use dry active yeast, which is what the original recipe that I worked with used. Or I learned during the pandemic, instant yeast works just as well. So whatever you have, perfect. 1 packet, 2¼ teaspoons into a small bowl or cup of your choosing, okay? And it goes. I honestly like the loose yeast because I lose the packets in the kitchen cupboard all the time. So I buy it in bulk and I store it in the refrigerator. They say it's good for 2 years. I usually go through it in about a year. So I don't actually know for a fact how long, but okay. You've got your packet of yeast in the small bowl. We're going to add some food. Yeast is a fungus and it needs something to eat. We're going to give it a teaspoon of sugar, okay, into the small bowl. That's it. And now here comes the important part. 1 cup of very warm water, okay? You don't want cold water because that won't actually activate the yeast. And if the yeast isn't activated, it won't bubble and froth and your bread will not rise. And that's no fun. Similarly, if the yeast mixture is too hot, if the water that you use is boiling, you'll actually kill the yeast. And the same thing will happen. It won't bubble and froth and your bread won't rise. And that's not so fun. So you want it very, very warm. I use just tap water. I don't use a thermometer, by the way. I used to go for sort of lukewarm. I've been getting warmer and warmer the longer I'm in this business. Definitely as warm as you can, okay? 1 cup of water into the bowl. Okay. And that is the beginning of our science mixture. If you have a spoon handy, or since I seem to always forget, oh, and I have forgotten my measuring cup, so let me get that. But I just use the bottom of the handle when I forget a spoon. But give it a good stir, okay? You want to mix all that up. And we're just going to put it to the side, okay? And we're going to let it do its magic. And that actually gives me an opportunity for a minute to talk about one of the many lessons that I learned making challah. In fact, I learned so many lessons that I wrote a book about my experience. It came out 4 years ago, actually this week. It's its book anniversary or bookiversary or I don't know what. But anyway, it's the 4-year anniversary of Braided, A Journey of 1,000 Challahs. And one of the lessons that I write about in that book has to do with this. So I learned the characteristic of patience. Okay, you have to wait now. The recipe actually said 10 minutes. I've never waited 10 minutes, but we'll talk about that in a second. But you have to let the yeast and the sugar and the warm water do its thing. It's going to proof, it's going to bubble and froth, and it's going to, that's what's going to allow the bread to rise. But it takes a little bit of time. If I poured that into the bowl now and just started mixing all the ingredients, because I have tried it, I can tell you, it won't work. The recipe will not work. So we're going to let this rise. And what I like about that lesson is that it is transferable, meaning I do this activity every week. I do this meaningful ritual every week. So I have learned I can take these lessons with me. I can take them out into the real world. So maybe it's a Wednesday and I'm sitting in traffic here in LA and I can be reminded that, oh yeah, I have a little patience, Beth. It's okay. Or the computer doesn't work or something happens and I can be reminded that, oh yeah, have a little patience. So I love that this activity of making challah just all along the way teaches me these lessons, these cool things. I'm not that patient though. We're not going to sit and do nothing while this rises. So we are going to continue to mix the dough in the big bowl and then we'll come back to that. Okay. You will notice that I have all of the ingredients right here, and they are in no particular order, okay? Every week I just grab what's first, and it always seems to work. So salt is what is in front of me. So that's what we're going to start with. 2 teaspoons of salt, okay? I'm using Morton's iodized salt. 2 teaspoons into the big bowl that you're going to make the dough, okay? I like this salt in particular because, one, it's iodized, and we need more iodine in our diets. Iodine helps our thyroid gland, the gland that sits right here. It's responsible for metabolism in our body. And I think it's such an easy way to get iodine in our diet is to, when you're cooking with salt, to use iodized salt. So I do that. I also just like the blue canister because both my mother and my mother-in-law have the blue canister in their pantry. So I think of them. Okay, so 2 teaspoons of salt, ingredient 1. Ingredient 2, oil. 1/3 of a cup of the oil of your choice. I'm using canola oil, okay? I specifically like canola oil because it is a neutral oil, and I actually don't want any flavor in my challah. But some people like the olive oil taste, or the coconut oil taste, or the avocado oil taste. It's an opportunity to make it your own, to personalize it. So use the oil of your choosing, 1/3 of a cup. Okay, so just to quickly recap, in the bowl, you have 2 ingredients, 2 teaspoons of salt and 1/3 of a cup of oil. Okay, sugar is next. 1/4 of a cup of sugar. I'm using just organic granulated cane sugar from the grocery store, nothing in particular. You can use a lot of different sugars, okay? You could use just what I'm using, just cane sugar. You could use stevia. I've made this with people that have used coconut aminos. Because it's Rosh Hashanah this week, maybe you want to add some honey. So again, an opportunity to personalize it. I am often asked how I, as a physician, can make bread, let alone white bread and bread with sugar. So let me pause for 1 minute to tell you that I strongly believe that perfect is the enemy of the good. And what we're making here is close to perfect, but probably not exactly perfect. And also my other favorite acronym is that everything in moderation. So we are using only 1/4 of a cup of sugar. We're going to make 2 challahs. And you're probably not, even though you might want to, you're probably not going to eat the entire challah. So most likely you're getting less than a teaspoon of sugar. In other words, it's not a lot. Okay, so I'm much more interested in whole food, in actual real food, as opposed to processed and prepared food. And this is a great example of that. We know what these 6 ingredients are. We've discussed them a few times already tonight, and it's not a lot of sugar. Okay, so in the bowl, you have 2 teaspoons of salt, 1/3 of a cup of oil, 1/4 of a cup of sugar, and now we're going to add 2 eggs. But I want to show you these eggs before I add them because the yolk is that really rich, deep saffron color. And I think every week when I put the eggs in the bowl, I think about this concept that I love in my medical practice, the idea of food is medicine, okay? The food that we eat, as you all probably know, has the power to help keep us healthy and sometimes to actually promote disease. So when I look at the eggs every week, I'm reminded of that because I get the best eggs I can find every week, the most nutrient-dense, nutrient-rich eggs I can find, the ones with all the lutein and the carotenoids and all these really great ingredients that we need to stay healthy. And you can tell because that yolk was such a deep, rich saffron color. I once did an experiment with a group of kids when we were making challah, and we bought a very cheap carton of eggs, and then we bought an organic pasture raised whatever, and the difference between the pale anemic yolk versus the deep rich saffron was really stunning. So I think about that every week, and I think about how I can try and be healthy and how I can help those around me be healthy by the food that we eat. Okay, we have 4 ingredients in the bowl. We are almost done with the ingredients that we need. Flour is our last ingredient. I am using all-purpose King Arthur flour. You can, again, this is an opportunity to personalize it and to make it your own. You can use whatever flour you'd like. I think that this recipe works really well with both all-purpose flour and with bread flour. I'm not a huge fan of other flours with this recipe, but I am a fan of Google. So if you wish to make, for example, a spelt flour challah or an oat flour challah or a gluten-free challah, or etc., there are great recipes. Okay, and I encourage you to find them. Okay, the recipe calls for 4 cups of flour. We're going to do 2 now and 2 in a little bit. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to approximately measure. This is where I am definitely a doctor, not a baker, not really leveling it off, but it's going to work out. It works out every week. Okay, so 2 cups into the bowl, and I'm going to start to mix it all up. And this gives me an opportunity to talk to you about something called the tactile arts, and why I think it's really, if you can, I think it's more preferential to make this recipe by hand. You don't have to, but I think that using your hands has a lot of health benefits. Actually, it's probably true as well, depending on what musical instrument you play. But the studies have shown that when you use your hands in creative pursuits, and the research that I've looked at predominantly looks at things like knitting and pottery, but I'm going to extrapolate and say both challah making and when you use your hands to create music, that when you engage in these pursuits, it's a wonderful way to quickly and effectively ground yourself, to feel calmer, to feel more present, to decrease your anxiety. These are all really important things that we need to address, can address, should address, etc. And an easy, fun way to do that is with the tactile arts. In our case tonight, making challah. Moreover, what's especially cool about this evening is that the literature shows that when you do these activities in a group, and okay, they were talking about a knitting circle, and I'm going to extrapolate and say, in our collective kitchens this evening, all of us making challah, when you do these activities as a group, it helps to foster a sense of community. It helps to decrease loneliness. And as you may know, we were in a loneliness epidemic before the pandemic. It only became exacerbated during the pandemic, and we are just now starting to come out on the other side of that. So again, I think doing these activities in a group, think about an orchestra, right, are really have a lot of ancillary benefits. Okay, so you will notice while I've been talking to you and mixing this up, I have a crumbly mess, which is exactly what I want, okay? In the bowl right now, I have 2 teaspoons of salt, 1/3 cup of oil, 1/4 cup of sugar, 2 eggs, and half the flour. Okay, so 2 cups of flour. So we're almost there. Okay, so I've mixed all that up, and now before we add the rest of the flour, what I want to do is actually talk about and then add the yeast mixture. Okay, so you will see that it did do what I wanted on top. Okay, it's bubbly and froth, you know, kind of coalesced on top. And then it almost looks like there's a line, right? And down below, it's a little sort of murky clay colored, if you can imagine. This is the ideal. I'm really happy with this. So thank you all for bringing that good intention. It worked, but it doesn't always look like this. So if yours doesn't look like this, my bet is it's probably still okay. Okay, some weeks when I do this, I don't get this nice sort of frothy top. It looks like this. I used to throw all those mixtures away, and I think I wasted a lot of yeast. I really can count on one hand the number of times I've had bad yeast in 15 years. So I know we're not actually communicating right now, but I want to say to you, if you're worried about your yeast, it's probably okay. Okay, so we're going to bring this back carefully. And I'm going to dump it into the bowl, a little unceremoniously, but there you have it. And we're going to get ready to add the rest of the flour. But before I do that, I am going to actually try and incorporate some of this dough into the watery mixture. It just makes it a little bit easier. Again, I don't think you necessarily have to do this. I don't do this every week, but when I remember, I try to. And it's also because you're getting a bit of a workout doing this with your arm. It's a nice reminder about the tactile nature of making challah. Okay. So that's almost all mixed in. I mentioned we have 2 cups of flour left, but don't add it yet because this is another lesson I learned making challah. We're going to add about 1.5 cups now. We'll add the rest as we knead the dough. And the reason that I like to do that is I learned the hard way. You can always add more, but you can't always take out. It applies to more things than making challah. But the point in this case is that some weeks the dough needs the 2 cups of flour, the extra 2 cups right now, and other weeks it doesn't. And it depends on so many factors. It depends on the weather. It depends on the water. It depends if you're at high altitude. Here in LA last fall, when there were the terrible fires, that week the air was really wonky and the bread was really different. And I had to adjust the amount of flour that I was using. So I've come to really, this is, I think, one of the more important steps I've come to embrace. And that is right now, not to add all the flour. We can always add more in a little bit. Okay, so now I have a soupy mess. Okay, everything for the recipes in the bowl except the remaining flour. So about 1.5 cups. Okay, so again, I'm not measuring exactly. It's going to work out. Go with me on that one. And I'm going to mix that up in the bowl before I get ready to knead the dough on the counter. Okay. If you don't wish to knead the dough on the counter, you can absolutely do the entire process in the bowl. I had a participant share that with me last year, and she's 110% correct. And it doesn't matter where you knead the dough. I like to knead it on the counter because I want that physicality, and it's messy and fun, and I really like that. As you can see, by the way, this is sticky, and I'm definitely going to need more flour. So I'm going to take a nice amount, so maybe almost that 1/2 cup worth, and put it on the counter. Okay, 2 reasons. 1, I don't want the dough to stick to the counter, so I'm definitely going to put some flour on the counter. And then 2, of course, we know we haven't added all the flour and it's probably going to need it, so we'll do that. I'm going to move that around. Okay. And I'm going to get the dough out, and I'm going to try and get all of the dough out because I'm going to put this dough to rise back in the same bowl. So I want it to be as clean as possible. You can certainly use another bowl. Okay, you don't have to use the same bowl. I just honestly don't want to wash another bowl. So this is very sticky. We're going to definitely need more flour. But before we actually knead the dough, before we knead for our needs, as I like to say in what I wrote in the book, I actually want you to indulge me for a minute. We're going to take a pause for a second. So when I was at the Cleveland Clinic, I was running a program to treat chronic disease through lifestyle modification. So we had a program that incorporated nutrition, exercise, and stress management. And we were treating patients with diabetes and heart disease and cancer and things like that. And it really works. I was dumbfounded by how well it worked. But one of the things that I took away from that, really took away from it, was the importance of stress management. And that's what I want to talk about for 1 minute before we go on. So we have all experienced stress in our lives. And I would be willing to bet that all of you know the impact of what that means. So whether you're stressed or whether someone in your world has been stressed, it's difficult, right? And if you're not feeling well, for example, being stressed makes it harder to get well. We have to have ways in our life to tackle stress. My favorite way, that's what I want to talk about and teach right now, because before I knead the dough every week, I stop and I take 3 deep breaths. The most incredible thing happens when you take 3 deep breaths, when you inhale deeply. You kick in your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest part of the nervous system. You may have heard it called that, as opposed to the sympathetic or the fight and flight. And what happens when you kick in your parasympathetic nervous system, this is so cool. Your vagal nerve that runs from your head all the way through your thoracic cavity, your abdominal cavity. And so it touches every organ system. It gets innervated. And you can literally calm down on a pathophysiological level. So we're going to do that right now. So if you're standing like I am, I want you to anchor both feet, okay? So you're secure. If you're sitting down, again, just make sure that your feet are on the ground and you're not going to wobble. Feel free to close your eyes if you'd like, or keep them open. I'm going to count, and I'm going to count to inhale for 3 and to exhale for 3. We're just going to do it 3 times. I want you to inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Okay? Here we go. We're going to inhale through our nose. 1, 2, 3. And exhale through our mouths. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and again, inhale through your nose. 1, 2, 3. And exhale through your mouth. 1, 2, 3. Okay, last one. Inhale through your nose. 1, 2, 3. And exhale through your mouth. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. I feel better, and I hope you do too. Remember that. That is a hack you have with you 24/7. You can do it at any time. If you're in a meeting and you're stressed, if you're standing in line at the grocery store, it doesn't matter. And nobody needs to know. Just stop and take 3 deep breaths. Okay? Let's go on and knead the dough. I'm going to use the heel of my hand. Okay? And I'm going to pull the dough forward. It's very sticky to begin with. Put some flour on it. And then I'm going to rotate it. You can go clockwise or counterclockwise, whatever you want. Okay? Doesn't matter. I'm going to pull it back, rotate. You'll notice as I do this, I'm picking up some of that flour because it was really sticky. And I want to work through all the stickiness right now. I don't want there to be any stickiness when I have my ball of dough. Okay, so what are we doing right now? We are working on the gluten in the bread, and we are incorporating that remaining bit of flour that we didn't use before, although I'm not sure I'm going to use it all. So I guess that'll be we'll just see how this goes. And I mentioned a little bit ago, I like to knead for my needs. This is a moment, again, where you can just take a moment, you can take a beat and just be while you're kneading the dough. Okay, so maybe you want to think about in whose merit you made the dough at the beginning of class. Maybe there's somebody else, maybe you want to send a little bit of positive energy to on this Thursday night. It doesn't matter. Just, take a few moments now and work the dough. The recipe that Abby shared with me, by the way, it came from the JCC in Manhattan from a Mommy and Me class. It's in the book. It's on my website. I haven't altered it. It's a very simple recipe. It said you needed to knead the dough for about 10 minutes. And I've never kneaded that long, okay? I knead until it's done. Sorry, as I lose my AirPod, there we go. And how do you know when it's done? It's one of my favorite questions. Okay, you know when it's done for 3 reasons. 1, it looks like I did actually use up most of the flour while I was talking to you. So I guess it was a little bit stickier than I realized. You know it's done because one, it's not sticky anymore. Okay. You may have noticed when I put the dough on the counter that I had dough all over my hands when I touched the dough. It came with me. But now you'll see I've got a ball, sort of, a ball of dough. It's not sticky at all, which is great. And my final way that I love to just sort of test it is to poke it like that. Okay, and it should bounce back, which it does. So I'm going to say this is done, okay, which is great. So now I'm going to put the dough with a little bit of oil back in the bowl. The oil is so the dough doesn't stick, because remember, it's going to rise, okay? And it will just make it so much easier if it's not stuck along the bowl. Okay, we are at an interesting point in the evening, because depending where you live and how late you wish to stay up tonight, you have a choice. You can cover this dough with saran wrap and put it in the refrigerator and let it rise overnight, okay? And it will do that. It's pretty remarkable. Or you can cover it with saran wrap, a tea towel, whatever you want, and let it rise for about an hour and a half, and then braid and bake it. Okay, so you have a choice as to what you want to do now. Both of those require that you cover the dough. Okay, you really want to make sure it's good and covered. You don't want any air in there. Okay, it works great if you do want to put it in the refrigerator tonight. I'm going to probably put this batch in the refrigerator. I'm going to cover it with saran wrap, and then tomorrow I'll pull it out and I'll bring it to room temperature before I braid and bake it. That takes anywhere from about an hour to 2 hours, I would say. Okay, I mean, you don't want to leave it out on the counter all day, but you certainly can leave it out for a little bit. This is what you are going for. I made this dough right before our class this evening. So obviously it didn't rise in the refrigerator, it just actually rose. My oven has a proof setting. So dough that has yeast in it likes the warmth. So if you have a proof setting in your oven, or you have a warming drawer, or if it were the middle of the day and a hot day, I've been known to put it outside. When we lived in Cleveland and we had those old radiators, I used to just put it above the radiator. You can get creative if you want, but if you have a warm place, it likes it. It rises really well. So this is what we have now, and this is what you'll have either in an hour and a half or tomorrow. Okay, but what I want to do now is demonstrate the braiding and the baking. Okay, so put your dough aside, and we will continue on. Another opportunity to bring intention and to just sort of center yourself again is actually at this moment. So I had thought growing up, I grew up very Reform in Cleveland, and I didn't know anybody who made challah. I thought it came in a plastic bag. We would have it, twice a year, and I didn't know what I didn't know about challah. And one of the things I didn't realize was actually the braided bread that I'm going to serve tomorrow night for Shabbat is just braided bread. The challah, the mitzvah, the commandment of making challah is the separation of the challah. And that's what I want to quickly demonstrate right now. So I do this every week because once I learned that, I was entranced, and it's just another opportunity to elevate the experience. Challah is such a special bread. It nourishes us physically, but it also nourishes us spiritually. And particularly now, as we're coming up on the holidays, it seems more, even more pronounced. So you take a little piece of dough, about yay big, and I'm going to wrap it up in the saran wrap. You can burn it. I've never done that, but one of you will do that, and one of you will reach out and tell me that you did and it was okay, and I could give it a try. But for now, I'm just going to wrap it in saran wrap and say the blessing. And the blessing is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu Allah hafrish challah. The Allah hafrish challah is for the separation of the dough. We are commemorating or celebrating, I guess. There used to be a second temple. Obviously there's not, but when offerings were made at the temple, that's essentially what we are just doing there. So I love to do that every week. I think it just elevates the experience. And then I go on and I braid the dough. Today, we're going to do something that I don't normally do, and that is we're going to focus on round challah because it's almost the holiday. And so usually I make 3-stranded challah. That's what I do every week. I keep it really simple. I don't put fancy flavors and toppings and all the things you can do. I just make plain challah every week, 3-stranded. But this week, because of the holiday, we're going to make round challah. And there are there's lots of symbolism and meaning behind the round challah. Some people say it has to do with the crown. Some people say it's because it's Rosh Hashanah, it's the head. It's a circle, and it's, we're coming up on another year. So there's lots of different meanings about it. And maybe you all have some other meanings as well. I love the idea of a crown. That's probably my favorite. So I'm going to make 2 challahs from this. Let's get this away so you can really see. And so to do that, when I do the round challah, instead of it being a 3-stranded challah, it's a 4-stranded challah. Okay. So that's going to be challah 1, and this is challah 2. You will see I am not using a food scale. I like to tell my kids it's artisanal. You can certainly use a scale and make sure that each section is exactly equal, okay? I just keep it simple. So I want 4 strands. So I'm going to eyeball and break it in half and then break it in half again, okay? And I'll do this one. Actually, I'll wait. I'll do that one in a minute. Okay, so we have our 4 strands and I'm going to roll them out, okay? Again, I'm not going for specific length. I'm going for uniformity. I want 4 equal strands so that when I braid them all together, it will be a uniform circle, okay? So I'm using my hands. Feel free if you want to use a rolling pin. I used to do that. One of our kids came back from Israel on a school trip and said, "Mom, I made challah with my hands." And I thought, okay, I guess I'll be making challah with my hands, or rolling out the strands. So it's become quite fun, and it's another opportunity for the tactile experience I spoke about earlier. Okay, so I'm currently covered in flour, and I'm clearly having a tactile experience, and I hope that you are as well. So I'm rolling out the dough, and as you can see, I'm going for approximately equal length, and I'm not succeeding, but that's okay. Perfect is the enemy of the good, and we will do okay. What I will actually do is I'll line up the strands that are closest in size with each other. Okay, that's how I'll handle that. So let's see how long I can get these. Okay, so I have my 4 strands, and these 2 are about the same. Okay, and these 2 are about the same. So I'm going to run them perpendicular. Okay, like that. Okay, and then I'm going to make a little cross hatch with it. Okay, so I'm going to put this one under, and then the opposing side down here, I'm going to put under. Okay, it reminds me if you ever made potholders as a kid at summer camp, where you did that cross hatch. So it looks like that. It's kind of a cross hatch. Okay, so over, under. So now all we're going to do is make a circle. Okay, the way that I remember this, two rules. Always start with what's in front of you. So we're going to start with these. Okay, that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, I always start with the strand that's underneath. And in this case, it's this one. Okay, so we're going to go left, right, left, right. Okay, as long as we can till we run out of dough. So here we go. We're going to cross. We're going to go over here. Then we're going to go over here. Then we're going to go over here. And we're going to go over here. And we're right back where we started. But now this one is underneath. So we're going to go over this direction. We're going to go over. Okay. And we're going to go over this one. And we're going to go over this one. and we're going to go over this one. And we're right back where we started. And we really are right back where we started because this one is underneath. We're going to go this way, okay? Over. Over. You might have to pull them as you get near the end. Over, and the last one over. I don't really think I can go back around too much, so I'm just going to actually tuck it underneath. And I love when I do that because it kind of puffs it up a bit and it gives it a pretty shape, sort of. So there you go. And you can see that in the center, here's that crosshatch that we started with. Okay, I'm going to do it again with this one, and I can take this apart too to do that again, but we're going to leave that right there for now. Okay. And I'm going to divide this into fourths and do it again. But actually, before I completely do that, what I want to do, I think I'm going to do something a little different on the fly here. First, I want to show you a different round. It's called a turban. Okay, so there are several different kinds you can do. Okay, we're going to do 3 different. I thought we were going to do 2, but we're going to do 3. So here's my traditional round that I make all the time. Okay, then this is called a turban challah. All you need is 1 strand. Okay, roll it out. And then you want to just start at one end and wrap it around like a turban. Okay. You just keep going around, around, around. When you get to the end, tuck it under. And there you go. It's that simple. But it looks gorgeous when it bakes. It's really pretty and it's really easy. Okay. We're going to do something slightly different. I just had an idea that I want to show you another round, but actually, let me show you what I mean by that. This is if you want to serve honey with your challah next week, which I know I'm going to. So I'm going to roll these out. And again, I'm trying to make them equal. I'm just rolling out 3. We're going to do a 3-stranded challah that I'm going to twist. Okay. So here we go. Get a little flour because it was a little bit sticky. Sometimes when you cut the dough after it's been in the bowl, it can be a little, right where you cut it can sometimes be a little sticky. So before I actually braid this, let me talk for a minute about toppings and fillings, because you can do some incredible things with your challah. Even though I like it plain, you can make savory challah, you can make sweet challah. It's super, super fun. And it's another way to personalize the challah and make it your own. You can fill it with chocolate chips. You can fill it with rosemary and garlic and olive oil. You can, next week, you could do apples and honey and raisins, and you can really have a lot of fun with it. If you're going to fill, you want to put, let's say, chocolate chips in your challah, an easy way to do that is just take your strand once you've got a strand like this, and just use your thumb, press it, flatten it out, okay? And once it's flat, you can imagine, right, that there's a trough in the center. You can kind of see that. And just lay in the center whatever you want. You could lay in the chocolate chips, you could lay in the raisins, you could lay in herbs, whatever you want. Then come back, seal it up, okay? Roll it around. Whatever you have is in there. And what I like about that technique, there are 2 things I like. It's not going to be all over your tray because you've wrapped it up inside. So that's nice. And 2, it's actually super fun when it's time to serve it because particularly if you haven't told people what's in it, when they go to open it, it's a surprise. So you can do 1 strand, 2 strands, or you can actually fill all 3 strands, okay? If you're going to do toppings, I recommend you do that after you glaze the dough right before you bake it, okay? So we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's do a 3-stranded to start with. So I'm going to crimp them at the top so they don't fly open in the heat of the oven. These bake, by the way, at 375 for about 25 minutes. Okay, we'll talk about that too in a moment, and I'll explain how you know that they're actually done. Okay, so 3 strands over into the middle, okay? Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, all the way to the end. Now, again, just like at the top, you want to tuck them under. So I think because it's the holiday and you might want to serve honey with your challah. Another thing you can do is actually do a challah like this, almost like a crown of sorts, and you can kind of wrap it around, and you can wrap it with the braid in the center. You can make like a honey pot in the center. Okay, I've done that before too. It's a crowd pleaser because it's very dramatic then when you put honey in the center. Okay, so these are the three that I'm going to then get ready to bake. So they go on a baking sheet with either parchment paper. In my case, I'm using like a Silpat non-stick liner. These are my favorite. You can also use, you can just spray the pan. But whatever you do, you want to do something, because if you don't, they will stick, they'll burn to the bottom, okay? So we're going to put these three here. And now we're going to paint them, as my daughter used to say when she was little. I like a rich, deep golden color, so I'm using an egg yolk, okay? You can also use an egg white if you want it to be lighter, but you still want something. Because it is the holiday, if you want to put honey as a glaze, feel free. If these were vegan challah, water challah, you could use maple syrup instead, or date syrup instead of the egg. And you could do nothing. You know, again, this is a time to personalize it, to make it your own. You don't have to do anything. You can just bake them as is. I like it because I like the deep golden color. And also, if you want to add a topping, it makes it obviously easier for the topping to stick. So let's say you're adding a topping. Once you've glazed it, you can add, again, savory or sweet, as whatever you prefer. A favorite in our house is the everything but bagel spice. If you haven't tried it, I recommend it. You can also do things like sesame seeds and poppy seeds. You can do sprinkles. You can do cinnamon sugar, I've had. So you can get, again, really, really creative with it if you'd like. Once you have it all painted and the way you want, and the toppings of your choice, if you're adding any, done the way you want, then it is time to bake it. And you're going to bake it at 375 for about 25 minutes. The only caveat I will say to that is if you are making a large round challah, so the other thing I do sometimes at the new year, and I'll probably do next week, is just make one big round one. That I would cook at 350 and a little bit longer because I don't want it to burn. For the smaller ones, I'm going to tell you now how you know that they're done. For that big one, I will say you need a food thermometer. And I learned the hard way. You want it to read 190 degrees to make sure that the center of the big round challah is actually cooked. I once served a beautiful looking challah that was raw inside. Live and learn. But these, you don't need to worry about that. 375, about 25 minutes. And there are three ways that you know when they're done. Okay. The first is the smell. I had never made challah until that first time 15 years ago. I had no idea the treat I was in for when our house literally became a home after about 15 minutes of the dough in the oven. That smell, that aroma, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about if you've made challah before, but it's incredible. So number one, you want smell. Number two, color, okay? I used on these an egg yolk. So this is the golden color of the egg yolk. They'll be lighter if you use either a whole egg or an egg white, but you get the idea. You're going for a rich baked color. The third way that you know it's done, when you take it out using oven mitts, of course, it's very hot, tap on the bottom and it should ring hollow. Okay, so those are the three ways that I know it's done. Okay, smell, color, and I tap on the bottom to make sure it's hollow. Then we let them sit and cool. And at Shabbat dinner or at a holiday meal, we say another blessing and we enjoy them. So I've now talked about multiple times during the making of challah where you can bring intention into it. So before I conclude what has been so enjoyable for me, hopefully, like music feeds your souls, this feeds my soul. I want to just wrap by saying I had 3 goals in mind that I think we've met. Okay. 1 was to make Challah with intention. 2 was to have a tactile experience. I'm covered in dough. So I'm going to say that was a success as well. And 3 is to make yummy and delicious challah. And you'll have to let me know how yours turn out, because I do think that that 3rd goal is quite attainable. To that end, I can be reached either on my website, which is just my name, BethRicanatiMD.com. I can be reached on Instagram, same, Beth Ricanati MD, or I can be reached on Facebook as Beth Ricanati Author. But I'd love to hear from you if you have questions or just to share your wonderful challah. And I want to wish you all a wonderful, sweet, and healthy and happy new year. Lashana Tova, and thank you.